it's time once again for a new discussion on Two Women Talking. That last one was a marathon about the fractures in feminism. I am Leanna, tomboy. I'm here with some WX and girly girl, and we're talking. This is another request from a fan. You can pay us to talk about what you want us to talk about, and this supporter wanted us to talk about female supporting characters instead of female main characters, and I thought that was pretty cool. So Song, I want to define off the top what a supporting character is, because when I was prepping for this, I realized this is the first mess we get into with these ensemble casts, what it means to be a supporting character. How are you defining?
I mean, I hadn't really thought about it in terms of ensemble casts, but obviously you have secondary characters who they're not the main character, but they are there to build out the cast to help you learn more about the world and the main character through interactions, and also to have their own adventures to flesh out the story.
Right. That's there's overlap with my definition, because a secondary character is a foil for the main character in some way. So for something like, Agatha Harkness in WandaVision, totally obvious, right? You get into Game of Thrones and we get messier about what a main character and what a secondary character are. So some of those ensemble casts are going to be pretty challenging. A show like WandaVision is easy because if the person's name isn't Wanda or Vision, they're a secondary character.
Yeah.
So, like I said, Agatha Harkness applies, but I guess we'll go a little bit loose, or we'll discuss whether a character is in fact a secondary character. And then how are we defining female? Now, the reason I ask is we are dealing with fantasy and sci-fi. So a character like Janet from The Good Place, who is a computer avatar, and she is an ongoing joke whenever somebody says this girl, she goes, not a girl, but she's female coded. Are we going to count characters like that, like Cortana from Halo, who is not a physical woman but is coded female?
Yes.
Okay, there we
I
go.
mean, I know so little about Halo, but I know the romance between Cortana and Master Chief, so I had never even thought about that. Oh, she's just programmed female.
Yeah, cool. There is a doctor that they introduce in, I could be wrong, but I believe it's Reach. That is the person that Cortana's image is based on, but Cortana is an AI.
Of course.
And I'm good with female being female coded. So, trans women are female for the purpose of this. AI are female. Fae races that are not gendered but perform a gender, a feminine gender, like Toadette, say, from the Mario games. We count them all as female for this. Some people get really, really hung up on that designation, and I want to take that off the table right away, because it's very frustrating for me to get into those fights, because that's a big problem. To segue into the actual discussion, that there's so much focus on female leads or female playable characters that I think the benefit of a really great supporting character is lost. I mean, case in point, Dracula is not the main character of Dracula, even though he's the title character. Right? Jonathan Harker is the most boring character in all of Dracula, but he's primarily who the plot follows in the book.
Yes.
Right. So this
Although no one cares about him, everyone just cares about Mina.
Right. And over time, Mina has become the main character. There's a stage play that we studied in high school where Lucy is actually the main character. They combined the characters of Mina and Lucy into one character. But
wait. Okay, look, I don't know much about Dracula. aren't they like two completely different women?
Oh yeah, but there's a stage play where they collapsed a bunch of characters, and I guess they thought Lucy was more as the first victim, the first high profile victim. They thought it was a not a great version of the play. We had to use it because we weren't allowed to put on original works in this.
Mm-hmm.
We had to put on something licensed apparently for board guidelines, but it was awful, and we're all like, we don't want to do this, and we dropped it and just did a skit assembly instead because it was so like, this isn't the cool books and movies that vampires were huge for a period in the 90s, and because of the
And
original run on Interview with the Vampire with Tom Cruise, who was not a great Lestat. But let's
no.
move on. I mean, there is an example of somebody who was absolutely phenomenal. Kristen Dunst's take on Claudia, I believe her name was, from Interview
Mm-hmm.
with the Vampire. She blew Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise off the screen when she was like 12.
Yeah.
She was great. Now that movie was really controversial at the time because of her inclusion. There because she was really young.
Mm-hmm.
But the character is I forgot how old she is, but she's trapped in the body of a 12-year-old girl or 13-year-old girl because she was turned at that age.
Yeah.
And she was great. And there was an example of, like you said, a character that not only gave the character somebody to bounce off of that gave a different kind of resistance, but also built the world and showed some of the moral problems of eternal youth. There is too much of that.
And
Go ahead.
even the Twilight books addressed that issue that like they're forbidden to turn a child
Yeah.
because they suddenly have all this power. But I cannot believe I'm referring to Twilight in a positive way.
Mm-hmm.
But turning children is forbidden
Right.
because it's all this power with a child's mind, so they can't grow beyond that because they're stuck there.
Oh, that's
Which
interesting that they don't evolve in maturity. That explains a lot about Edward.
I know, doesn't it?
Yeah, Twilight. Let's move on. Going back to Agatha, because Agatha's a great female secondary character, right?
Yes.
But Agatha is an example of a female character who steals the show without eclipsing the main character. Catherine Hahn played a real balance there where she picked her moments and played with Elizabeth Olsen's Wanda as opposed to and I mean the writing up until the last, I don't know, 3 episodes of that show with the slow burn really allowed her to be a scene stealer without stealing the whole thing.
Yeah.
And you juxtapose that with some of the other um female backup characters that end up in Disney slash Marvel slash Star Wars, end up, I don't think eclipsing in terms of popularity or performance, but certainly start eclipsing the main character in the plot. And that's a mistake. I've seen that happen a lot in modern shows though. And you follow the background, so maybe why this is so more.
So,
Like there's this thing, all the CW shows. Have you watched any of the CW DC shows?
mm-hmm.
Okay. You know how it starts off, the show is called The Flash or the show is called
Mm-hmm.
Arrow, and for the first season, 2 seasons, it's about The Flash and Green Arrow. But by
Mm-hmm.
season 3, season 4, everyone is running around with fucking superpowers and it's a hot mess.
God, I hate it.
Yeah. Do you
It,
know why that happens? Because it just seems like the, the it's deliberate at this point because they keep doing it and it's never good, but there's got to be a reason.
it might just be poor writing that they're like, okay, we need something to do, or they're trying to build their own Avengers. Um,
Okay. You don't
but
think it's a U-shaped box phenomenon?
Maybe. I haven't thought about that too much. I think there is also an issue where we get a lot of main characters who aren't that interesting because they're not that well developed.
Right.
But then you get the side characters, and maybe part of it is because the actors come in and they do such a good job with the material, or just maybe the writers feel less pressure with them, so they get to
Mm.
do more with it. And so they become more interesting than the underdeveloped, sometimes even completely flat main character that the audience is supposed to project themselves on.
Okay, because
So,
I mean, I sometimes it's like, yeah, okay, it's a shooting schedule thing, but
mm-hmm.
they need, they're trying to jam it all in, especially on streaming, because they're
That
cheap
might.
bastards. So that's why
Oh
there's
god.
that third episode diversion, which sometimes in American Born Chinese really worked because it was the backstory of the Monkey King.
And
But go
mm,
ahead, sorry.
so there are, if you know this, the pattern, not even the pattern, sorry, I'm trying to find the right word.
Yeah.
If you know that that's how a TV show is structured,
Right.
you should be working within that. The problem is, if some of what we're hearing about how the script writing sessions at these streaming places
Yeah.
work, if no one knows what episode they're working on and they're really just hiring people for a couple days to do just a look over on a
Right.
script so they don't have to pay them, then you're not actually taking time to flesh out the story of it.
Yeah.
I was watching a video essay on something last night, and someone in the comments said, "Oh, well, they don't have time to flesh out characters anymore because there's only 8 or 9 episodes, not 18 to 24." And I'm thinking, eight
They do
episodes
it
is
in movies.
totally,
They do it in movies.
it is totally enough time to flesh out
Well,
characters. Some people just have no idea how good writing works.
well, I mean, everything everywhere all at once. They fleshed out every single one of those characters. It was a
Yeah.
2 hour and something minute movie. But
Yeah.
I mean, you get a character like Caitlin Snow in The Flash. Caitlin Snow, the minute she said her name, it's like, oh, she's going to become Killer Frost. That's deliberate. But
Mm-hmm.
they they could not find anything for Iris to do. And that was so frustrating because one of the things the Flash comics does pretty well is the relationship between Barry and Iris.
Mm-hmm.
When it's not when they're not fucking it up with a retcon. And so you'd
As
think
you
they'd
do.
have they oh my god, they for some odd reason they like to wreck marriages in comics. Actually, stick a pin in that because we'll get into Mary Jane and Mary Jane good versus Mary Jane bad. I know we're going there because I mean that's an important one that I think a lot of people get wrong.
Oh yeah.
But
No.
with Iris, there was so much to draw from the comics that really worked. I don't know. I don't know if it was because it's adults writing shows for teenagers and people can't figure out what teenagers actually like that isn't people being horrible shits to each other, aka like Riverdale. But the fact that they couldn't find anything for Iris to do, so she was either in the way or imperiled somehow every season. That was so upsetting because the actress was quite good, quite likable
Mm-hmm.
in the part when she had something decent to do. So, I mean, there's an example of one that was, Killer Frost was clearly planned to have an arc. And I don't think anybody expected The Flash to go on as long as it did. So I'll be somewhat forgiving. As opposed to, Olicity with Ollie and Felicity. There's a fantastic character that I think they didn't expect to be so popular
Mm-hmm.
because that relationship isn't canon in the comics. It's, Green Arrow and Black Canary.
Wait. Felicity is in the comics.
No, I think they put her in somewhere now, but no, she was they put her as sort of an oracle type character on the
I mean,
show. She was an original character, and
okay.
she just people loved her, and I can see why. She's a cute girl. She's tech. She's fun. She's got glasses. She's pretty. I
And
get
at
it.
one point in the show, they did put her in a wheelchair.
Yeah, but to me, I was like, why do you have to ship someone just because they bring sparkle to the show? I actually thought because Oliver was such a dick on that
Yeah.
show, I didn't want her with him. And that too often they use women to humanize a shitty main character.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be the problem when they do a Fantastic Four movie because uh what Fantastic Four they choose to do, Reed Richards is pretty awful to sue in the comics at times. And you know, the rumored casting attempt with Matt Smith,
Mm-hmm.
you could do some interesting things. He's kind of a good choice, but I think that if you put someone with his ability to act without words in, you need an actress that can match him.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a bad feeling they ain't gonna, just based on one, the fact that somebody who would actually be a really good Sue Storm is already a shitty Captain Marvel. And I don't think it's her fault. I think it's the way the character's written. But Brie
Mm-hmm.
Larson would be a good Sue Storm. They like to race swap Sue Storm. And that's one I disagree with simply because of the way the Fantastic Four works. They are that old school nuclear family, and I think they should run with that
Mm-hmm.
because I think you can tell a more interesting story showing how a family that closely knit thrown into that much trouble can, develop cracks and hopefully tell an interesting story about family. Let's face it, they're not gonna,
No.
because okay, I'm gonna leave this up to you. Do you want to talk about Mary Jane first, or do you want to talk about my arch nemesis Sylvie?
Let's do Sylvie.
All right. Bah! How not to do. Remember I said it's got to be a foil for the main character,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't eclipse the main character.
Mm-hmm.
One, that character on paper and that character as performed are not the same person. I was listening to her dialogue and going, no, wrong, no, wrong, no, wrong. The correct actress to play that character is already Ghost in the MCU. Hannah John Kamen would have blistered that part because it's pretty much Dutch from Killjoys. If you have not seen Killjoys, everybody, watch Killjoys. I would love to talk about Killjoys, but not enough people have seen it. Because they've got some really interesting supporting characters. But Loki started off as an interesting buddy comedy with Loki and Morbius, Owen Wilson's character.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, all right, it's going to be Marvel does Doctor Who. Cool. And then episode 3 is this giant backstory for Sylvie, where we find out I think she said she's like 1,200 years old at one point, but she's been on the run since she was 8 years old. She'd be a freaking feral beast at that point. She wouldn't be this cold fish, slightly snotty, constantly, oh, will you grow up? You know,
Mm-hmm.
she's supposed to be another Loki, meaning she's supposed to be another mischief being. There is nothing mischievous about her. She's just unpleasant.
Mm-hmm.
And that was cloudy because Sylvie in the comics is actually Enchantress 2, who was she was basically Loki's Smurfette. In the
Mm-hmm.
comics, she was a construct created to start shit. I don't know why they didn't stay with that there was some weird split from all the variants, and it's like, what the fuck? I just created, do a sort of weird Pygmalion thing, where he has to sort of be somewhat responsible because now he's created a thing, and way more interesting than what they did, because I think they're trying for a redemption story with him. And they've, first of all, you don't need to if there's a golden timeline, because nothing he did is his fault. If he didn't make exactly those choices, he would have been erased from existence.
Mm-hmm.
That's more interesting to deal with than what they did, because they decided, oh no, he's not such a bad guy, because we're going to have Sif kick him in the balls over and over again for cutting her hair. Which, pro tip, is something that is maybe not the nicest thing to do in these series where you reveal he's bisexual, because that's what gay boys do to girls they think they're supposed to like and don't. You know, they kind of torture them. But then you get this really, really irresponsible, shitty love story where she uses him, but they're not. It's the same problem they did with WandaVision. The interesting gray areas of the character were clearly unintentional. And have you ever come across anything else where there would be an interesting character here if they actually leaned into the fact that they're not a great person, like Yennefer in the Witcher books and the Witcher 3 game? There's a good example of one where Yennefer's complex, right? She's kind of a mess.
Okay, so I'm gonna bring something up with Yennefer.
Yeah.
So when Yennefer and Geralt meet in the Netflix show,
right,
it's a scene where she has mind controlled a bunch of people from the town
into an orgy.
An orgy in front of her because she doesn't want to pay taxes. But that is sexual assault.
Yes, it is.
And I was so pissed when I found out that they added that. That's not in the books for anyone who hasn't read it.
It's so much
but
not.
then in season 2, they do the Shard of Truth story, which is the Beauty and the Beast retelling.
Right.
And for anyone who hasn't read the books, again, Sapkowski does a lot of fractured fairy tales, because the whole series is an inversion or a subversion of fantasy tropes.
And I personally think that's where The Witcher's at its best, in those fractured fairy tale short stories. The novels weren't as good. They got weird.
But even besides that, you know, it's the story of the whole point is, okay, stories about the chosen one are stupid. Here's a story of a so-called chosen one where it was really just a misinterpretation of a prophecy about climate change.
Yeah.
And it doesn't actually matter in the end, because, you know, history will be misremembered anyway.
Right.
And one of the big problems the Netflix did is they're playing it straight. And part of that is because they don't know the fantasy genre. Right. So they don't know the tropes that the books are subverting. So they're just playing it so straight and turning it into a completely generic fantasy story.
That's a good point. They don't see the deconstruction, ironically.
And it's because they don't know what they're playing. Fantasy is one of those things that it's popular right now to have this gritty fantasy that's, you know, for people who don't actually like fantasy, because, oh, well, it's gritty and serious. But anyway, so getting back to the point,
doesn't like fantasy. That's an easy thing to say, but everybody likes fantasy to an extent. You know, Barbie is fantasy.
Some people who just consider it to be, you know, Lord of the Rings ripoffs everywhere.
But I mean, Barbie is a portal fantasy. The movie.
But most people don't understand that.
Yeah, I mean, people, I think, don't realize that fairy tales are fantasy. All those Disney movies, they're fantasy.
Most people consider that to be for kids. So fantasy has been relegated to, oh, that's for kids, or for nerds living in their mom's basement.
Okay, they don't see it as adult. Well, and then they watch Game of Thrones, and as long as there's creepy, abusive sex, then fantasy's okay.
Oh, well, that's serious and that's adult because it's saying something, which it's
Oh
fucking not.
boy,
But
that's
anyway, so the point I was getting to in the second season of Netflix, they do the Shard of Ice beauty and, or not Shard of Ice. That's Shard of Ice is my favorite Witcher short story, but they do A Grain of Truth, I believe it's called,
okay.
which where it turns out the beast got his curse because he was running around with some friends and they basically peer pressured him into raping a priestess or something.
Sounds
But,
about like what they do in the books. Yeah.
but so he is treated as completely unforgiving, or it's impossible to forgive him because he's done the worst possible thing. He doesn't even deserve for Geralt to kill him. He's
Right.
told to kill himself.
Right.
So here's the thing. If you're going to say that because he made one mistake years ago, and the books raised the question of, can someone be redeemed?
Right.
Can he move on from that? Which led to his bizarre relationship with the not the Striga. Oh God, what are the pretty vampires called?
The succubus.
Oh, there's a
Oh,
certain
what
kind.
the hell are they called? I can see them
Yeah,
from
you
the
you know the
games.
one that talking about.
Yeah. I can see them from the games, but the name escapes me as well.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's
yeah,
like a succubus, but they have horns.
kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember if she had horns in the book, but so the books raise this whole question of, can he be redeemed? Can someone move on from
Mm-hmm.
doing this horrible thing? The show is just like, he did this, he's terrible. It doesn't matter that he and Geralt had a friendship over years in this version, you know, fuck him. But
Yeah,
Yennefer gets to
yeah,
sexually assault people because she doesn't want to pay taxes.
yeah. I mean,
And this is fine.
yeah, I have issues with everything they did with Yen
Oh,
in
oh yeah.
in the show. I mean, Yennefer's an example of, I guess we can say she is a supporting character because she's not a witcher.
It's also, there are like two of the novels where she spends one of them as a statue,
Yeah,
she spends one of them as a captive, so it's like she's absent
yeah,
of the
okay.
story.
Yeah.
So yes, technically she is a secondary character,
Yeah, because she's
but
not Geralt or Ciri.
yes,
Yeah, okay.
and it's like, obviously that pains me a little to say because we know I love Yennefer,
And I
but
do too, but I think this is an example of a character that she is able to be so shades of gray and so complicated precisely because she is a supporting character. And let's talk about this because I'm sure you have strong opinions about this.
mm-hmm,
One of the things you can do with a secondary character, going back to the whole femme fatale trope, is you
mm-hmm,
can have their motivations and portions of their history be unknowable. And that Yennefer in the books, there was very scant. There were a couple references to the fact that she was born with a birth defect, so she was ugly, and
mm-hmm,
so she was rejected. And so part of the reason she uses the glamours is that beauty is power.
mm-hmm.
And that's supposed to juxtapose with Triss, who's allergic to magic and therefore can't cover up the giant blast scar she receives on her chest. Wow, did that go out the window with the games? But in
It,
the show, they graft a backstory onto her. And to me, I was horrified and felt it was violating the character. How did you feel about that stuff?
I agree. Another thing is they completely mess up her story because you have Yennefer in the books and games who she's been through horrible things, but she knows what Aretusa gave her.
Right.
That it, in making her beautiful, they didn't just give her power, it gave her the ability to enjoy life. And
Mm,
she does so to a hedonistic degree. It's like,
which I think is what they were trying to do in that scene. But
did it?
hedonism's not assault.
No, and they did it so poorly. Like, guys, the unicorn is not the weirdest thing in her house.
No, it's not. It is so not.
It's also not the weirdest place she and Geralt ever got it on.
Is the unicorn weird? I don't know. I
Okay,
know
so
that's a
like
thing, but
I remember when I first saw the memes going, what the fuck are you talking about? I think we're kind of desensitized to it at this point.
maybe it just I don't know. The unicorn, when people were all about that, it's like you guys are pretty basic vanilla if you think that's a big deal. I mean, I thought it was supposed to be over the top, and that unicorns are associated with this sort of inviolate purity,
Yes,
and
and I
sort of
mean,
bang on the back of unicorn. That's Yennefer going fuck your morality standards.
yeah, that's the whole reason she does it.
Right.
Um, you know, she she only turns in the book, she only turns on the Lodge of Sorceresses when kind of when they're not doing anything for her, when they threaten Ciri,
Right.
basically. But in the show, you have her, she's miserable. It's like,
She's miserable, but she's also victimized, and that's not her.
she revels in it. She makes herself the victim in some ways, and she goes in and she's, yeah, she repeat. Guys, I watched an 8-hour deep dive on why the Netflix Witcher doesn't work last night. It's kind of heavy in my thoughts. So I'm just gonna say that's where a lot of this is coming from right now. But it's she's exposed to how bad Aretusa can be
Yeah.
repeatedly,
Yeah.
and she keeps going back and trusting them. Like, it's one thing for her to be like, oh, well, they gave me this and I enjoy this and I definitely wouldn't want to go back, so okay, I'm good, I'm going to enjoy my life, to, you know ranting about patriarchy to a dead baby
Yeah.
about how, oh, you've won the game by not playing yet, and then a few scenes later it's, oh, I want to have a, why would you bring a child into this world? These
Yeah.
two things are completely incompatible, and you're not giving me any, like, it is possible to have that juxtaposition, to have these counterintuitive thoughts. But if you are going to make a character counterintuitive like that and hold two conflicting positions, you need to delve into the character and what their headspace is with that. But also saying, oh, I want a child so I can be their whole world, and so someone will finally love, that is the worst possible reason to have a child.
That's also the most reductive interpretation of why Yennefer bonds with Ciri.
And then to give her Ciri in the show, and oh no, she's gonna kill her so she can get her powers back. Fuck you,
Yeah.
for a showrunner who says, oh, what drew me to this story was the whole idea of this found. You're not showing it. you
No.
you have you have reduced Geralt and Ciri to mentor and student. You've reduced Yennefer and Ciri to this extremely toxic user. Like, just because Yennefer calls Ciri my little ugly one does not mean that their relationship is toxic. It's an inside joke because Yennefer doesn't want Ciri to be defined by
That's
her
right.
beauty and how
That's
she
right.
looks.
That's right.
She
There's
won't.
the lot of that in the books that both the games and the show totally missed, and it confuses the fuck out of me.
Games do play it a bit more straight fantasy without quite so much subversion, but one, they know what they're doing with fantasy, and they're not just some amateurs who are like, oh, how hard can fantasy be? It's hard.
Well, the Witcher 3 does a really good job. But Witcher 3 is the one that I think does the best subversion.
Mm-hmm.
One, I'm really curious what they're going to do with the remake slash remaster, because that first game is rough.
Well, I mean, they had never made a game before,
Right.
considering it's the first game this group of guys made.
Yeah. Yeah.
It,
I mean, it's
it,
impressive based on that, but turning Geralt into a uh promiscuous murder hobo where Yennefer's a non-presence in the first game. She's actively derided in the second. And it really pissed me off. They were obviously, well, they weren't even Triss fanboys because they changed Triss. So I don't know
well,
what I don't know. There's an example of if you're going to adapt something, why aren't you adapting it? Why did you hate the primary? Well, why did you hate the triangle with Geralt, Triss, and Yennefer? It's central. If you're not going to do it, don't adapt the story.
okay, but let's be honest, there isn't actually a triangle there yet. Triss just wants there to be.
Oh yeah, I mean, there is definitely a, and this is what I liked about, this is what I liked what they did in Witcher 3 with resolving that, that in order to get the good end with Triss getting her job back, because that was some shittiness that happened to her in Witcher 2. You know,
Yeah.
she got fired because of her association with Geralt, and that was seen as, oh well, what did you expect? But she gets her job back. She's the primary income earner. He's basically a stay-at-home dad, and they're raising Ciri together. The only way you can do that is if you don't do the unicorn sex with Yen. You choose Triss, and Triss finally tells Geralt off and stands the fuck up for herself. And after years of being so annoyed by that character, and we can talk about why being annoyed by a character like Triss or being horrified by some of the things Yennefer does is actually good character. This is what I liked about The Witcher. I mean, characters like Philippa Eilhart, I forget her name, Kira
Metz.
Kira Metz, that's right. They're all infuriating and they all do things that are frustrating and horrifying and flawed. And Triss, you just want to kick in the head because she's following Geralt around like a little fangirl, settling for what she can get. She reminds me of this person I used to know who claimed to be polyamory, but she just kept pining for guys and some girls, I think, who were good-looking people and therefore wanted to be with good-looking people. And I thought that it was okay, instead of either, doing something about your appearance so you can quote unquote compete, or going, hey, you know what? These people don't share my values. Why am I pining after them? She just kept signing on to be people's thirds in relationships that were never going to last. That's kind of Triss without the, quite as kinky sex.
And it's interesting because, when I first started getting into The Witcher, and I would have the game fanboys push back whenever I'd be like, the only way Triss ever gets Geralt into bed is through magical manipulation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Triss is pathetic in the books, intentionally, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so just as a caveat, we never see Geralt and Triss's first meeting. We never see. We know that she used magic to seduce him after he had a disagreement with Yennefer, and that's how she got him into bed.
Right.
But we never actually see that, and we never saw them before that. So it's like, is it possible there was some attraction there that he just wasn't doing anything about? Maybe. I kind of doubt it. But it could be that his response and keeping her so at arm's length is she violated him.
I mean, and that's a plausible theory.
Yeah, and but at the same time, he is very kind to her. because Geralt is a dork
In
and
the
an
books,
absolute.
in the books, like it sort of waffles, and I like this between him being kind to her and him feeling sorry for her.
Mm-hmm.
And I interpret, and this is very open to interpretation. I'm not saying this is canon,
Mm-hmm.
but to me, what he sees in her is that damaged part of himself that allows himself to be used by women because he does treat himself as disposable. You know, he goes in there and gets beat up by monsters and very rarely gets actually paid. And then dandelions already cause problems locally, so they have to GTFO real fast. Uh, he is sort of a schlub. Like you said, he's a dork.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that he he sees a similar hopelessness in Triss, which
And
is combined why he is kind to her and isn't as attracted to her as he is to Yen.
and there is, when you hear him talk about things he thought and felt in the past, and one thing the books talk about is he wanted so badly to be a hero
Yeah.
when he left Kaer Morhen, but like one of his first time he ran into his first encounter after leaving Kaer Morhen was a merchant and his daughter, I believe, who were being attacked by bandits. He
Mm-hmm.
saved them, and they absolutely hated him for being a mutant.
Right.
And so you see, it's even like, what was that? He had this long name that he wanted for himself, which
Yeah.
it was all pomp. And it's like, oh, he wanted to be the knight in shining
Yep.
armor.
Yep.
And you realize, once you realize that, and then the bigotry and hatred and cruelty he's received from the
Mm-hmm.
world and how it's beaten him down, that's when you understand his character
Yeah.
of.
And I mean, that's why Henry Cavill's so perfect to play him, right? He really wanted to be Superman. Really. But he's a
Yes.
stealth nerd, and that's why we love him. He's gonna put his foot in his mouth sometimes and fuck up and say some things that are gonna get him like yelled at, and then he's gonna build his own PC. And like he is Geralt in a lot of ways.
He's I don't know what exactly it is. He's neurodivergent. I'm like 99.99% certain.
He's a guy I would, and he's so attractive that this is rare for me, but he's a guy I'd want to hang out with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same way I feel about Geralt of Rivia. That no, I don't want anywhere near him in terms of anything romantic or sexual. He's bad news. But to sit down and just hang with him, yeah, he's a great bro.
He would love that.